Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. As you said, my name is Wout. I manage the customer success team for Leanplum. Leanplum is a mobile engagement tool, which basically means we do everything post-download to engage with your users, from push notifications, emails, in-app optimizations, and all of that is also powered by a very A/B testing tool. And that's what we're mostly diving into today. And joining me here is Sebastian from My Postcard, who leads growth there. So if you want to just give a quick intro.
Exactly. I'm Sebastian. Nice to meet you all. My Postcard is basically an app that allows you to take your photos that you have on your smartphone and send them easily worldwide as a real post or greeting card. And I'm responsible for everything that comes from attribution, engagement, optimization. That's what we're here for today, and also analytics.
Perfect. And so if we talk about, growth is these days a very sort of wide topic, right? And you're responsible for the entire funnel. So what has been your general approach of like, hey, how am I going to approach growth? And why did you pick, A/B testing or product A/B testing specifically? So testing things within the app as a go-to thing.
I think in the end, generally we try to think of it as on like 3 different axes. So we need to have the actual resources to make it all work. We need to have the time, both to prepare and also to actually do the testing. And the third thing is then we actually need to know what we want to optimize for. I think that's what was for us the most important step in the beginning. So because throughout the whole year, throughout the years, you actually get to know what's the right KPIs and how do you actually measure success with those KPIs. Mm-hmm. And I think once we knew that, we knew what we actually wanted to do. We started spitballing ideas, and over the years, we were actually able to test it then.
Nice. And so I think everybody here is familiar with A/B testing. Obviously, we test one thing against the other, and hopefully we see a positive result, and that can then help roll things out. But doing actual A/B testing is I think a little bit of a myth in terms of how easy it is. It goes a lot of time and development into it. So what do you think? Like, how do you go from, let's say, idea to setting up an experiment and then doing the analysis? What's your general approach there?
I mean, the favorite part is always the ideas.
Yeah.
It's the easiest part because we all have ideas, but in the end, it's really about figuring out which ideas to test or which ideas to test first. So for us, it's really to figure out what's the actual scope and what's in the end, what's going to be the resources needed and also the impact that we're expecting. So it's clear that the further you go top funnel, the easier it is to get results in a very short time. But also in the end, we're all interested in bottom funnel. Like, how do we actually get more people to buy, more people to sign up, more people to buy repeatedly? And I think that's where, in the end, of course, especially in the beginning, when maybe not the whole company is already on board, you need to get the buy-in. So on the one hand, that meant starting with the tests that were where we were going for the low-hanging fruits to get the results in, because results in the end are always a really good way to get people on board.
Yeah.
And then also they show you in the first impression, what are people actually interested in when they come into your app? And you can then basically take that data and pull it down the funnel and try to test those concepts at a different stage in your app. And that's kind of how we approach things.
Very cool. And if you then take a step deeper, because that's coming up with the ideas and sort of mapping that out a little bit. But for My Postcard specifically, what did you decide to focus on in the last couple of months? As in hey, these are interesting elements of our app that we should run tests on. What was that based on, and how did you make those decisions?
In the end, there's so many things you can test. Even if we're just talking about categories, you can go just with copy. You can go with colors if you want to. You can go with different scopes and also different ideas behind different functionalities. Mm-hmm. So for us, I think the most important was in the beginning, you're actually able, and you still are to this day, to send your cards without signing up. So our first idea was, of course, how do we get more people to sign up while not lowering our conversion rate when it comes to the first purchase? So we were able to do that with the register wall. Then we basically also moved along some other lines. And for example, for us, word of mouth effect, especially referrals, very, very important. So one of the key KPIs that we're tracking. And that was one of the best tests we did because it literally took us 10 minutes to set it up. And we got 25% more referrals, mm-hmm. Which is still compounding. So it means that every time or every day people come to the site and actually sign up their friends, invite their friends, and that's good for us. And all it took was basically 3 lines of text that we had to change. But because we had a platform where we were able to test that, that's basically the results we were looking for, but they're also reliable, and that's in the end what really matters to us.
Right. And so if you, because that is indeed a very good, use case, like, hey, we're just updating 3 lines of tests and we see a 25% increase into our referrals. I mean, that sounds probably like a dream for everyone here. But how did you come to like, hey, this is what we're going to test. We're going to focus on increasing our referrals, and changing the text is going to be the one thing. Was that just a random idea? We plucked it out of the air and we implemented it, or can you talk maybe about the process it took to get to that stage?
I mean, we don't have to really talk about it. It's of course like the best case scenario, and it doesn't happen all the time. For every test that works like that, there's like 10 which you probably shouldn't have done, especially in the beginning. But for us, it was really more like changing the text. Normally, it doesn't really mean much. What we did with text, we basically changed the whole idea about why people invite friends. Is it really about the community? Is it about getting a reward for themselves? Or is it really a reward to give to someone else? So for us, that was basically the whole test. And in the end, we knew that we wanted to test that. It was one of the first tests we did because it seemed simple enough. And that's really something that for us is, again, important because our team isn't that big, especially on the tech side of things. So the more we can actually rely on variables that we only have to set once, which then allow us to test things over and over again, that's golden for us. So for us, it was really, we knew that was one of the 5 most important KPIs. We knew that was the test we wanted to run, and then it was fairly simple to actually set it up. So that's kind of like the scope of this idea. It wasn't too genius, to be honest, but in the end, the results were more than we actually expected.
Yeah, and that's often the thing, right? Like there's super complex things that you can do, but sometimes you just want to get the simple things tested, and it already gives you a bit of result. What's your experience in that? Like, is it often the more complex things that make the most impact, or is it the more straightforward things that give you the wins that you're looking for?
Our most time-consuming test had the biggest impact, but the impact was our CEO wasn't really believing in it anymore. Because if you show him, look, we just spent 10 minutes on this, 25% up in referrals, expectations can get kind of, you don't want to really deal with that.
Yeah.
So we had to really like pull him back down and actually talk about what's realistic here. One of the other tests we did, where it's really about the sign-up process, the onboarding, stuff like that, it took us probably 5 months to get that right. So throughout the whole time, that was developers working on different features, working on different like sign-in screens and everything like that. It took us a really long time and a lot of resources to do that. And especially in the beginning, it looked like there was just nothing there. And if there was anything there, it was negative. But also we just waited it out. Of course, we needed the statistical significance. Once we got that, we actually figured out what the idea should be, changed it, and by now we're up 5%.
Wow.
And on like a really low funnel goal, which for us is great.
Yeah, but that is a process that takes week over week, month over month, and that's not one test that you run and then say like, okay, cool, we're here.
Ideally, it is like that. Ideally, is that you come up with an idea at 8, put it up at 8:30. A week later, you're like, oh my God, there's more money now. But in the end, that's not very realistic, and that's just one really idealistic part of that.
Yeah. But you are enabled now to run those tests, and now that you've done a couple, it actually goes a little bit faster.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's more experience, and you start learning what probably is going to work and what is just not. In the beginning, some of our team who were still not really bought in. They really knew it from like web A/B testing, but all they did was basically should the button be red or green, which has an impact, but in the end, it's not going to help you too much in the long run. So for us, it was really more not just a tool to actually get better numbers when it comes to our KPIs, but on the other hand, also to really understand our users. Because in the end, you have an idea, and the more you're in business, the better the idea gets of who are your users really. But then if you actually give them different options to choose from through an A/B test, you actually figure out in those scenarios, what are they more likely to go to? And based on that, what can you really say about your audience? And I think that really helped us, not just in those aspects, but also when it comes to producing content for them, producing different occasional campaigns that we're doing. So it really served as both a tool to optimize the KPIs, but also to learn more about the audience and the customers.
Nice. Yeah, and I think learning more about your user base is obviously sort of the key part here, right? You do an A/B test to learn something, but what I always find fascinating, like whenever you see success stories on A/B testing, or even when we talk about it now, is like, 24% increase. What actually happens after you stop the A/B test, right? Like you've seen it, you roll it out, and what's your next step then? Is there a process? Have you learned anything there? Is it then like, how do we make sure that this continues on? Is there a follow-up test? What's your sort of like thinking around that?
I mean, to be fair, we had someone in our company who basically saw the results, like, oh, well, done. We solved it.
Yeah.
Now we can do something else with that money.
Go on holiday.
Yeah, that's not how it works. So basically for us, it's kind of cliche, but we look at it like always being in beta. So if it's test 1, we take the winner. That's going to be the control group in test number 2. And then we basically roll it over again, because you can always learn more. You can always try to optimize it. I mean, in the end, they still come back into the same pool. So if we figure based on what are the resources we need to actually do the next testing, what is the time that we expect that to take? Because in the end, if you're looking for like a 1% increase at something that's really like bottom funnel, it's going to take a while, especially depending on like how big you are, how many MAUs you have, how many people actually check it out. But for us, it's really, if we actually had success, it's really doubling down on it and figuring out why exactly. Because of course you want to make sure just to test of one variable instead of like 2 completely different concepts. But even if you know that one kind of wording maybe works better, there's still 10 different variations of that you can test. So that's what we do if actually something works, and still not being afraid to like throwing something in there where you're not quite sure, but you like the general idea of it. And especially if you fail with something, I mean, we always try to stay fixed on the goal, but always being flexible in the approach. So if you really can find a way to figure it out, how to get certain numbers up, just throw more ideas at it. And if it's easy to test, yeah, why not?
Yeah. Awesome. So I think there's a lot of stuff going on about A/B testing best practices, and you should do it this way and that way, and very in-depth analytical kind of like models and complex wording around it. What's your take on A/B testing sort of best practices? You've been doing it for almost a year now. You've kind of learned, adapted within the organization, which I think is one of the biggest challenges to get from a development side, from a marketing side, from a CEO side, people behind you. But what's your take on best practices?
I mean, in the beginning, they definitely helped. So my view is a little bit split on it, because in the beginning, especially when we really focused on it, like of course you knew about A/B testing for a while. You did it maybe on the website, but in the app, we were searching for like a good solution for quite a long time. So for us, it was really the decision between starting at nothing and starting at what did others already do and what seemed to be working. And in the end, we really came down to a point where just because something worked for someone else, and even if I'm talking now about the tests that we did, doesn't mean that they work anywhere else. So It's not me talking about it in like general terms. It's really more, that's my experience. Maybe there's something in there for you. But what we found to be like a successful strategy is just trying to understand the meta idea behind it. So why this campaign? Or why this test? And what's actually in it? What's the goal behind it? And maybe there's a lot of really cool companies out there who do a lot of really cool testing, where you can actually just go in, see the different variables, and then just ask yourself, like, why did they do it? What's the idea behind it? And how can I apply that meta idea to what we're trying to do? And I mean, that's kind of like how we approach things, but from now on, basically.
Cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, we only have a couple minutes left, but what I would love to get your take on, like, you've obviously been using Leanplum for the A/B testing, but you're ahead of growth, so there's a lot more going on there. So there's re-engagement with push and email and all these other channels. How do you see like doing a product A/B test or testing something inside the app, combining with those engagement channels? How do you look at that? Like, where do you start in your funnel, so to say? Do you start basically at the end, like the deeper down numbers, or do you start with the user acquisition and then how does that all tie together for you?
Ideally, you do both.
Fair enough.
Of course, it's the same thing over and over again. I mean, for us, it's the decision is just that in the end, you need to look for strong partners, and ideally, you just align on what's important to the business. So for us, it's definitely analytics. We need to be highly efficient. Like postcard AOV is not really that high, so you need to be good at what you're doing. And in the end, for us, it was really what can we actually learn through the campaigns, but also through the A/B tests that we then basically put in the same pool, learn from that, and try to like educate internally, whether it comes to like content creation, different strategies for campaigning and stuff like that. So for us, it's really, in the end, it all ties together. And I think especially if you want to do A/B testing, which you generally should, then it's definitely something where like try to get as much data as you can beforehand from your other campaigns, just to actually understand who you're talking to. Because maybe you have already done A/B testing when it comes to messaging. Just take the general gist of that, general ideas, and try to make them bigger and test them like when it comes to functionality or bigger user experience things.
Cool, awesome. Yeah, I mean, 15 minutes flew by. I know we've had a lot of emails back and forth about this, so I think there's a lot more. If you have any questions, we'll be around and we can help you. If you want to know more about Lean Plum, you can visit our booth. And yeah, thanks all for joining in.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Cool. Cheers.